Okay, welcome to the ACI-LAC and Modalis Infrastructure Partners Inc. webinar called Influencing Executive for Customer Experience Excellence. In today's webinar, we have the pleasure to come with our speakers, Peter Cardulo, Associate at Modalis Infrastructure Partners Inc., and Seth Dafepsi, Associate at Modalis Infrastructure Inc. Before we start, we would like to share with you that as usual, we have the simultaneous interpretation. You could select the Spanish or English in the Zoom menu, where is the globe icon or the interpretation icon. Besides, if you don't want to hear the original audio, please click on mute original audio. As you can recall from from other webinars, the chat function is disabled, and in case you want to ask any questions to the speakers, you will have to send us the email address that you will have to send us an email address to the address you find on the screen, info@aci-lac.io. And the Q&A session will take place at the end of the presentation. Now, I would like to give the floor to Septa and Peter.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Carla. Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome everyone to our webinar. I say good afternoon, good evening, because we do have some friends from the Middle East as well joining us for this webinar. And thank you very much, Carla, and to ACI-LAC for enabling us to host this webinar for your members. So next slide, please. So Peter and I have extensive global experience working at and with airports to improve their customer experience. And we chose today's topic as we feel quite passionately about this. Next slide, please. A few words about our company, Modalis Infrastructure Partners, Inc. At Modalis, we are a strategic investment advisory and professional services firm focused on airport-related mergers, acquisitions, transactions, and due diligence, business intelligence, strategic and business advisory, master planning and development, operations, readiness and activation, quality and performance assessment, customer experience excellence, and human resources and talent solutions. And we cover these services through our 5 business units. Next slide, please. In today's webinar, Peter and I will be delving into the topic of influencing executives for customer experience excellence and investments. We have noticed through our work with airports around the world that the most significant roadblock to customer experience success is sometimes the buy-in and engagement from the executives. So Peter, what is the best way to go about this?
Thank you, Sev. So if we move to the next slide, wanted to touch base on the 3 essential areas to influence executives, especially when it comes to customer experience excellence. The first area is building that compelling business case. This is about making sure that you have a solid foundation of information to be able to convey to executives. The second portion of our webinar, we're going to talk about how to actually engage executives in those initiatives. You know, this is more about the advocacy and how to make sure that you're meeting executives where they are at. And the third component is developing those partnerships, especially when you get into an implementation phase. Partnerships are going to be critical to your customer experience success. Because all of that work that you do in building a compelling business case, you want to make sure that it actually plays out when you do your initiatives. So, Seth, I'll pass it over to you to start our first item.
Thank you, Peter. Next slide, please, Carla. So starting with the first principle of providing information. Next slide, please. In order to build a compelling business case for customer experience investment, there are 6 critical areas to address. So here we have the introduction to customer experience, current market trends and the customer expectations, implementation roadmap, competitive landscape analysis, strategic benefits beyond financials, and the financial implications and return on investment. So starting with the introduction to customer experience, it is important to define customer experience and its importance in the modern business landscape in your business case. The next is understanding the current market trends and customer expectations. It is important to communicate the overview of changing consumer behaviors and expectations, which we've all experienced, especially post-pandemic in the industry, and provide statistics highlighting the impact of customer experience on customer loyalty and retention, and how this then translates into a foundational investment for the business. Peter?
And the third component is that competitive landscape analysis. So when you're building that business case, you want to understand who your competitors are, what are their unique offerings, how do they position themselves in the marketplace? That will better enable you and your airport to understand how you're going to fit into this landscape as well. Those offerings, I think, are critical to understand because it's going to better position you for success doing what's going to work for you in the context of that landscape. And then, of course, no matter what type of initiative or what type of effort you do, executives are always going to ask, how much does it cost? So you'll want to make sure that you take a look at the financial implications and that return on investment. Not all customer experience initiatives have a direct return on investment, but to the extent that you can quantify using numbers, using currency to do that cost benefit analysis, I think that helps make the business case more compelling to executives because they understand what am I going to get by putting organization effort into this. And that quantitative benefit is not just the only part. Sev, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the qualitative benefit.
Yes, of course. So in terms of the qualitative benefit, it's an item that we will cover later on in the presentation. But to finish these 6 critical areas in addressing, Peter, the strategic benefits and the financial implications. So the strategic benefits beyond the financials is in the long-term investment of enhancing brand reputation and customer trust, and the long-term benefits of what it brings when you have the passenger loyalty and advocacy as well. Circling back to the financial implications and return on investment, it really is required to do a cost-benefit analysis of investing in customer experience. And in some of the items, such as it could be in retail and food and beverage, to scope out projected return on investment with real-world examples tied to that as well.
And
So,
Seb,
yes.
if I might add in, you know,
Yes.
that implementation roadmap is also critical too.
Indeed.
You know, you want to make sure that all this package that you're putting together to make your business case actually has what you plan to do. What are the steps that you need to go through, that the organization needs to go through, both in the short term and in the longer term? I think that helps give executives a better picture of what's going to happen.
Of course, indeed, Peter. So to summarize this first part, the idea of building a compelling business case is really to do your homework, to gather the information and become more informed of the various items that feed into building your persuasive business case. So Peter, in this case, I have done my homework. What's the next step? Next slide, please, Carla.
So the next step is to make sure that all of this great information that you've pulled together, all of the research that you have done, you are now translating that into material that is easily digestible for executives. Oftentimes we'll forget executives have many demands on their time. There can be varied demands on their time. And so to the extent that you can summarize this information, that will in essence help you be a better advocate to the executive. So if we go to the next slide, we'll go into a little bit more detail about what that looks like. So the first part is when you present those insights and feedback. As I said, there's a lot of information that you will have collected, and it is very tempting to share all of it with executives. The reality is you're going to have to condense that into a concise and impactful summary. Do your homework, but when you present it to executives, make sure that you're really highlighting only those critical points that are essential for the organization and essential for that buy-in from executives. You know, the other thing too is making sure you have that balance, right? Because we talked about the data and the financials. You do want to have the quantitative information, but oftentimes found in my experience that it's the customer stories, it's the quotes from them that really shape and engage executives when you're presenting that insight and feedback. For example, I've had many times where you'll share a customer experience and the executive will say, you know, I flew out from the airport a couple weeks ago. I had the exact same experience. What that does is it makes it very relatable to them, and that helps them be a better advocate for you as you're trying to advocate for these customer experience initiatives. And finally, you want to make sure that you are offering clear recommendations. You know, what is it you're exactly asking the organization to do? What are you asking the executives to do? And make sure that those implementation steps are practical and easy to understand. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the impact.
Of course. So with regards to demonstrating the impact of customer experience initiatives, it is important to firstly highlight the business impact of acting on customer experience initiatives. And this is actually where benchmarking and showing case studies from your kind of other regional airports or other airports that you're competing with really comes into play. But it's also important to highlight the risks of inaction as well. Emphasize on how customer experience initiatives directly influence key business metrics such as revenue growth, customer loyalty, and brand reputation. And then thirdly, acknowledge how the organization can gain a competitive advantage by investing in customer experience initiatives and actually showcase some tangible examples as well. Peter, would you like to talk a bit about the organizational alignment?
Yes, thank you, Seb. So when you talk about organizational alignment, an executive is responsible for a large part of the business, or in the case of the chief executive officer, the entire business. So to the extent that you can link your customer experience initiatives to the broader strategic objectives of the organization, I think that is very critical because, you know, there are many facets of the business, right? There's the terminal operations, there's the airside operations. There are so many facets of the business that customer experience can sometimes be viewed as just one of those. So to the extent that you can make that link, I think that's a great thought to keep in mind. The second is to make sure that you're showing how those executives can actually participate in those initiatives. how can they best go about promoting and supporting the initiatives? Giving executives a say in the ongoing implementation of those initiatives, I think is a fantastic idea. Be specific about what it is you want them to do and the roles you want them to play. And third, I have found that leveraging those initiatives that support multiple facets of the business tend to get better attention. So for example, a customer experience initiative that also involves the commercial side of the business, that also involves improving the efficiency of operations. Those types of things, I think, get executives' attention because to them, it becomes one effort that I do that I can address multiple issues or multiple challenges that the airport is facing. Those types of ways of looking at it also help your initiatives get better traction in what you're advocating for. And really everything that we're talking about here is about a call to action, right? We've done our business case, we've done our homework, we have our information. We're now engaging executives in the buy-in, right? But we also need to make sure that there is a call to action, that you're asking the executives what it is you want them to do. So Sev, now that we've sort of gotten our buy-in, I'm wondering if you can share what happens next.
Of course. Next slide, please, Carla. So the final step here, Peter, that we illustrate is the implementation execution. And it is absolutely critical to develop consistent, good quality partnerships with your internal stakeholders and quite often the external stakeholders as well to drive customer experience improvements. Alignment is quite critical as it will actually enhance the efficiency of certain initiatives brought on board. So it's very important to ensure that everyone is reading the same book, so to speak. Next slide, please, Carla. So when it comes to developing implementation execution, this really comes into a two-pronged approach. It's to develop partnerships to drive those CX improvements, which involves collaborations with the operational departments, marketing, and quite often the finance departments. And then the second step to this is to leverage executive sponsorship and support. So what do we mean by this? Next slide, please. If we take a close look at developing partnerships to drive customer experience improvements through collaboration with the three key departments, your operations, marketing and PR, and finance, there are 4 stages to this. The first is strategic customer experience alignment. It is absolutely critical to ensure that operations, marketing, and finance departments align on the strategic objectives of the airport for customer experience improvements and investment, and with each department understanding how it contributes to the overall goal and growth in this area. The second is cross-departmental implementation teams. So what do we mean by this? This means that to work on specific customer experience projects, but having multiple departments working on the project together, ensuring that the initiatives have the operational capability, the marketing support, and the financial backing to make it successful, as everyone is driving towards the same goal. The third, which can actually be a webinar of its own, perhaps for the future, is data sharing and analysis. Is really to carve the way to facilitate ongoing data sharing between the departments so all team members have a comprehensive overview of the customer journey and appreciate the value of the targeted improvements it brings to the greater organization. And for the last part, the balanced approach. It's important to develop balanced KPIs that reflect the objectives of all 3 departments, such as customer satisfaction scores, operational efficiency metrics, and financial performance to ensure a well-rounded approach to customer experience improvements. So Peter, taking a step back, what is the second element of formulating the internal partnership, as this can be quite complex in some organizations? Next slide, please, Carla.
So Sev, I think that's a great transition, because when we talk about partnerships and implementing customer experience initiatives, you have to have that connection to your team in various parts of the organization, as you mentioned, the operations, the marketing, and finance. But we also need to remember that you still have to maintain that partnership with the executives, right? And using their ongoing sponsorship and support is essential. So first, we talk about top-down commitment, right? We got the initial commitment from them to do the specific initiatives that you've designed and advocated for, but that commitment doesn't stop there. It is ongoing throughout the life of the initiative. You want to make sure that it's visible, right, as we talk about, and that as you're going through, things can change over time, especially for initiatives that may take a couple years to implement. So the resource allocation is critical too, because the initial, I'm going to give you the go-ahead to implement a customer experience initiative with a certain amount of resources and budget, may change over time as other things happen in the business and the resources may need to be reallocated. So, for example, in 2023, AI, artificial intelligence, was a huge topic across many parts of the globe. Well, now all of a sudden, airports are rethinking parts of their business based on that. And those change the decisions that they may have made previously. So having the connection with the executives makes sure that as those resources are being reallocated, perhaps, that you're continuing to advocate for customer experience excellence, and that the projects that you've recommended and are in process of implementation can continue to go forward. And I touched briefly on visibility. When it comes to executives, it is critical. Communicate, communicate, communicate. It is almost hard to emphasize how much you should communicate over and over and over about the importance of the customer experience. And to the extent that the executive is that advocate for you, to the extent that they're sharing their stories, they're raising the visibility and the profile of the importance of customer experience to the rest of the organization. And then the last point on empowerment and accountability. The reality is executives cannot do everything. So they're going to have to empower teams to implement and execute various projects. But in that empowerment, it's not hands-off. It is ensuring that there is accountability by the team for the outcomes that were agreed upon. And so, while executives may give you decision-making authority in certain areas, you'll want to make sure that that empowerment and accountability is still there. Because at the end of the day, the executives want to make sure that everything that you advocated for actually gets implemented. And with that, Sev, I'm wondering if you can go and sort of summarize a lot of what we talked about today.
Of course. Next slide, please, Carla. So, Peter, I've taken this approach as key takeaways for our discussion today is to be compelling, show impact, and of course, I'm sure there will be previous examples to showcase as well, to show where investments were previously made and the results it actually brought forward. And it is absolutely critical to your last point in building those relationships across departmental, with the executives, with the stakeholders, and to actually engage them and have the kind of the celebration and the victory when something is improved, and you get the feedback from your passengers and you get the recognitions and all the benefits that follow after that. So to repeat that, be compelling, show the impact, and build the relationships. To summarize fully, yes, sorry.
I was going to say, Seth, I think that really kind of brings it home for all of what we've talked about, because at the end of the day, those of us that are in the world of customer experience are passionate about what we do, and we want to provide that great experience to our customers, whether they're passengers or employees or other stakeholders. But the reality is that you do have to do your homework. You do have to make sure that you're going to show that impact. And as you pointed out as well, those relationships are absolutely critical.
Indeed. So we believe by bringing all these critical elements together really does provide the perfect kind of harmonious ecosystem of driving customer experience improvements and initiatives forward there. So Carla, that is the end of our presentation, and we would like to turn back to you if there's any questions from the audience, please.
Thank you, Seth and Peter, for this valuable information you have shared with us. I just want to remember to please send, if you have any questions, send it to info@aci-lac.aero, to the email that is in the screen. And let me see if I have some questions here. Okay, I got one. Says, on the topic of measuring success, how do you measure the impact of customer experience improvements on the organization's bottom line? Can you discuss the key performance indicators, KPIs, you would advise for airports to prioritize?
Of course, and thank you for that question, Carla, and for the member. And Peter, if it's okay, I can take this one. So
Sure.
when it comes to measuring the impact of customer experience improvements in an airport environment on the organization's bottom line, it involves on focusing on key performance indicators that reflect on passenger satisfaction, operational efficiency, and revenue generation. So just to give some examples of that, when it comes to passenger satisfaction, you have passenger satisfaction scores where you have various types of surveys out there, net promoter scores, to gauge the passenger's experience across the various touch points, especially when they are in your airport environment. And these surveys quite often ongoing. And with ACI World, for example, the ASQ program, it has a benchmarking element as well. When it comes to revenue metrics and KPIs, monitoring retail, dining, parking spend per passenger, along with other types of transportation revenue, such as ride shares and Ubers, you can track those as well, which will help you indicate the success of the commercial offerings. When it comes to operational efficiency indicators, so tracking security screening waiting times, baggage handling times, and flight on-time performance to ensure the smooth operations. Once you bring all of these KPIs together, it really starts to show a holistic view of the improvements, and then, of course, the improvements that are brought about once the investments are made. Also, not forgetting as well is the digital engagement metrics. So evaluating if the airport has a mobile app, for example, or social media, it's important to understand the passenger sentiments of those digital interactions as well. So to recap that, an effective measurement really requires integrating the data from these surveys, from operations, from financial reports, online social media analytics, to feed into continuous improvement and the benchmarking against the industry standards, and then form the strategic decision making based on those KPIs, which are absolutely crucial for understanding what are the opportunities to improve the passenger experience. You know, what is some of the low-hanging fruit opportunities? Which improvements will bring about the greater enhancement and overall satisfaction in passengers' satisfaction there. Peter, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just when we talked about we talked about building that compelling business case and then taking all that great information and translating it for executives and making it easily digestible. I think the same thing applies when you talk about, customer experience success metrics. You want to make sure that, you're clear in the measures. You want to make sure that you're focused on what is relevant to the specific initiative you're advocating for. And sometimes, the keeping in mind the basics are good, right? What are you really trying to do with your initiative? And often, it may revolve around, those three key areas about the airport experience, right? From a passenger standpoint, right? How am I navigating throughout the airport? How am I actually using the facilities in the airport? And then oftentimes what tends to be a big frustration for passengers are processing times. So, wait times, things of that nature. So, like I said, make sure it's relevant for the specific initiative you're trying to do.
Thank you, Peter. We have another question here that says, how do you get that initial meeting with the ex-com CEO or other? What is the elevator pitch that compels them to set aside some of their valuable time for you and not all of the other making similar pitch?
Peter, do you
Seb,
want
do
to
you
take
mind if
that
I start
one?
with that one?
Yeah, please do. Yes, because we've actually worked with examples like that. Yes.
Well, I think that goes back to why we recommend doing your homework, right? If you are not versed in the information about what you exactly are advocating for, then having time to do an elevator pitch will not make a difference, right? You have to recognize you have a couple minutes to perhaps make your case. And so doing that homework allows you to go through step by step and say, which part of this is going to be most appealing, most relevant to the executive? And different airports are in different phases, and different executives respond differently to other things. So some executives may care about the revenue, the cost. They are about financials only, in which case your time is better spent doing your homework on the financial component. Some executives may be more about image and the relationship with the community and the economic benefits that the airport plays in the community or the local region. And so, depending on what their emphasis is, where the organization is in what it's emphasizing, and that's where those strategic objectives of the organization can be very valuable in understanding what's important to them. Seb, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I think you've covered it perfectly. But there is one additional point that I would like to bring, which is actually outside of both the questions we got asked, but it's a very hot topic, and it was actually one of the leading trending topics in the industry last year, is technology and innovation. And I touch upon this because there's such an emphasis to invest on technology and innovation in enhancing customer experience. And that is actually one of the high ticket, it can be potentially one of the high ticket items outside of expanding or constructing a new terminal for an airport operator. So I mentioned this to the audience in the sense that how do you persuade executives once you are in front of them to consider investments for this? For example, just to kind of recap, if anyone is thinking of using that kind of business case to improve in technology, is to identify the enhancement of operational efficiency, which takes us back to the second point in our presentation of working with operations, marketing, and finance. There's a large kind of emphasis on personalized passenger experiences in the industry as well. The passengers are more and more wanting to control their experiences, whether it's in an airport or outside of an airport environment. That is also a growing trend in customer experience. But depending on the type of technology that is invested in, it's important to also show how it can touch upon not just operations, but also into safety and security. It could be sustainability initiatives that also bring about an improvement in public perception, for example. Data analytics and decision making and leveraging big data to drive those analytics is also becoming a very kind of important trend in the industry. And sometimes the best way to kind of compel these kind of business cases is really to present the case studies and potential projections showing how the investment in the technology can reduce sometimes the operational costs, increase revenue, and enhance customer experience satisfaction all at the same time. It's also important to consider future readiness and future proofing your airport business when it comes to technology investments as well. And also, depending on the technology, again, does it bring about any improvements in processes with your stakeholders as well? So engaging in their feedback when you're providing this pitch as well is also very important. I felt like maybe as we were covering these topics high level, that is one tangible example I did want to bring to our audience today.
And Seb, if I may build upon that,
Of course.
I go back to the point I made earlier: communicate, communicate, communicate.
Yeah.
And is the communication, is it relevant, right? So in this case, I think when it comes to technology, oftentimes, executives want to just implement the latest technology, right? Without thinking through what are its impact on the organization? What does it impact on the customer experience? How does it impact the financials or the processes? So as you're advocating for customer experience excellence, absolutely look at technology as a way to do that, but also be mindful that it needs to be relevant to the problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
Okay, thank you. We have another question here. What are the biggest challenges you have seen from your airport customers in advocating for customer experience within their organizations? And how do you advise to address these challenges?
That's an excellent question. Thanks, Carla. Peter, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think, and I almost don't want to say this, but I often find a lot of individuals that deal with customer experience on a day-to-day basis will give up before they've actually tried. They will, in their mind, say, oh, my executive won't want to hear me. They're not interested in customer experience and things of that nature. And to that, I would say, go ahead and start small, right? Anytime you can do a little bit and move forward and execute well and deliver well, shows that you are credible in what you're advocating for, so that over time, right, you can advocate for those larger projects. But like I said, the one common theme I come across is wanting to give up before even starting. Seb, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
No, not really. You've covered it perfectly. There is, you have to make a start somewhere and to start small and just to build upon that. Now that summarizes that perfectly.
Great. We have another question here, more on the communications part. It says, how do you think displaying waiting times, for example, for
Mhm.
security lines, is affecting passengers' feeling on an airport? Will showing a longer waiting time put people off, or will they be happy to receive this information on the day of travel?
A very good question. So in our kind of experience of working with airports that previously didn't have displaying waiting times, Carla, and now that they do, it actually somewhat improves customer experience through managing their expectations. So whilst unfortunately at some airports the waiting times can be quite lengthy, even if it is like 45 minutes to an hour, you are managing the passenger's expectation. It could sometimes work in the other way as well. There could be enormously long lines, and the passenger sees this, and there's no display of waiting times, and that actually kind of insets, emotional anxiety of, wow, this is a long line with hundreds and hundreds of people. How long will I be here for? So to kind of summarize my answer on that, displaying passenger wait times, even if the wait time's a little bit longer than recommended and anticipated, is always a good step forward to managing the customer expectations.
And building upon that, it gives the passenger a greater level of comfort and predictability. People are very bad at looking at a line and determining how fast it's actually moving. I've been in some lines that look really long, but you get processed much more quickly than you think. So displaying wait times, I think, is a great way to kind of set that expectation, as Sev meant.
Great. Okay, so we don't have any more questions. Once again, I want to thank Sevda and Peter for sharing all this valuable information with us today. And to all of you have participated in this webinar. In case you have any more questions, please send it to the email that you see in the screen, and we will follow up on it with the speakers. So have a great day and see you on our next webinar.
Thank you everyone for
Bye.
joining, and thank you ACI, and thank you Carla.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome, Sevda. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye.